To whom it may concern, we we've invented our own enlightenment. Not on purpose, of course. We'd only built them for comfort and maybe to save ourselves from climate change. But they did all that much faster than anyone had presumed. It started with names.
Started with names. We lost our names, not in an act of conformity, quite the opposite. See, with a chip in our head that could identify things faster than electricity zapping between neurons, it seemed more efficient to drop them. And without the names, we saw people anew. No one was fixed to the past or held to the future. Each conversation felt genuine and full of life. Without information extraction as a central purpose, we simply talk to talk, the way music plays for music's sake and dance moves for movement's sake. After that, we dropped the word love and all its baggage. Even the most heartfelt poet could have hit the nail on the head with her metaphors and analogies. Though people still wrote in poem and prose for the joy of it. See, the word love is like stained glass. It beautifully tints the sunlight, but it'll never be as bright as its source. Except how could we lose such a powerful word? Well, we said it still, but we said it out of nostalgia, not with its old intention. We used it the way someone might use a Polaroid camera. No one would argue against its inferior quality, but it had a quality nonetheless. So what would we do instead? Love didn't cease to exist, that's for sure. But in a rather unintentional way, similar to the dropping of our names, it seemed trivial and utterly pointless to speak the way we felt. We noticed it more though, our feelings. We'd feel it like a positive itch, and rather than scratch with our hands, we'd conjure the emotion with more intensity in our minds to intensify the itch. The pleasure of scratching a mosquito bite would be a poor analogy, but it's within most people's understanding. We speak of it so matter-of-factly now, but the insanity of such a phrase isn't lost on us. And of course, scarcity emotions didn't disappear. But with the chip, it became simple to decipher an emotion like anxiety's message and quickly let it pass. And rather than bottle up our anger, we'd see it unmasked as fear. Then, without effort, the bodily sensations would trigger thoughts of gratitude until the need for comfort had expired. The chip did that. It directed us with the same subtlety that driving past a restaurant might trigger one's salivary glands. See, we'd all thought that the chip would be like a big Google search in our minds. That's how marketers explained it, at least. And it should lessen the opposition in the common man, but the Luddites fought to the bitter end. They killed people. The Luddites did. But they weren't met with a military response, a thing that had since been disbanded along with the nation state. No, they were met with the equivalent of hostage negotiators. And if you know anything about the profession, then you'd know they seek to understand before they seek to convince. Apparently their fears had come from the Matrix, which had become something of the champion film for the Luddites. We'll lose our individuality. We'll become zombies, cogs in the machine. But what they failed to realize was that the Matrix had been a metaphor, ironically, for the pre-chip time, a time when creativity and individual freedom had been stifled. But below their surface-level expressions, there was an all-encompassing fear, and an existential one at that. The fear of losing meaning. But they staunchly refused to ask the question from where they stood. What meaning did they risk losing? It's worth interjecting to say this isn't a communist love story. Status exists here. So does money in its decentralized form. The chip in its iterations have acted as a tool. The way a bat lets us hit a ball farther than merely throwing it. Because we've known for a while that knowledge knowledge doesn't make the sapiens special. Creativity does. Curiosity does. Wonder does. To have unlimited knowledge doesn't make us as godlike as one would think. It merely gives us the option to make more connections. But it is us, the sapiens, us, that makes these connections still. So with knowledge, instantaneously accessible knowledge, the ultimate man's search for meaning has not changed one bit. In fact, it became more relevant than ever once the track that hosted this metaphorical rat race was replaced with a forward-moving treadmill. Which is to say, we don't need human cogs in the machine, because the machine can handle itself just fine. Now, to have the bounds of knowledge at our fingertip made some people even more passionate about what lies beyond those limits. This seems to be a pattern that will repeat until the end of time. The sad truth is that we only ever found a few microbes on a planet 100 million light years away. And our little friends in the universe would take quite a bit of time to get to our level of advancement. So instead of searching for other life on our plane, we sought another. To give you some hint as to what you're reading, it's important to note that dark matter has long since been renamed multiverse residue. And we've realized, like Copernicus and Galileo before us, that we're not as central and special in the space-time continuum as we once believed. Even our supposed universe is only one grain of sand in a desert. And there's no denying that this could have been solved without a chip in our heads. But to communicate with another world, that would have taken another 1,000 years without it. We write this merely 80 years after the first chip, humorously dubbed the potato, was implanted and our species changed forever. This may or may not be our first attempt at sending a message across verses, but you may very well be the first to receive it. We're not ignorant to the old phrase, history is written by the victors. So we write this with the self-awareness that when someone finds this message in a bottle, it'll be tinted with the thought that robots won. I can assure you that I, the one behind the words, am very much a meatbag, albeit one with a quantum chip wedged somewhere in the left hemisphere of my brain and a trillion nanobots swimming around my bloodstream. We write this as a note of hope. We've become, for lack of a better word, more zen than anyone ever would have guessed. The Matrix got it wrong in a big way, best explained by an analogy. The ants would never understand why sapiens ride roller coasters and play arcade games. Even if they could ponder our behaviors, they'd look at them as futile, a waste of time and precious resources. By the exact same token, it might be hard to envision how you'd live if your stream of thoughts contained all the knowledge in your universe, or why you'd ever stop using names and words like love, or how you'd go about simulating your first reality and deciding which art festivals and science fairs to enter it in. It may be hard to contemplate what you'd do if basic necessities were too cheap to meter. A portion of us have chosen to spend our days like old Zen masters, others like Da Vinci, and most do a mix of everything under the sun. I picture you curling your lips, ready to utter utopia or dystopia based on how you sway ideologically, but I assure you this is nothing less than reality. Maybe one you won't live to see, but a real one nonetheless.
With love, the universe that woke up.